director of this department, I was like, obviously, I was kind of like, I know this is a huge risk because it's the metaverse. This is how we call it now, but it's the Web3, and I know this is a huge risk. It might just drop suddenly. It might not, not go very far. But then, I mean, the finances that are going on metaverse is insane. It's like beyond you would never grasp.
So far, how has been your weekend?
Hi Pedro, thank you so much for inviting me. So my weekend has been pretty chill. I think I'm gonna work today, but yeah, so far so good.
And if you could please just introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. So I am Mariana Cabugueira. I'm a senior architectural designer from Zaha Hadid Architects, and I'm currently a director for Wild the World, which is a metaverse company.
Thank you. And so how did all this start as an architect? When did you realize you wanted to become one?
So when I was really young, so when I was a child, I wanted to be a painter, and I wanted to paint walls on construction sites. And my parents basically, I was like 6, so they kind of tried to convince me that architects do that as well, but with a degree. So I kind of felt for that, and I decided, okay, then I'll be an architect, and I'll paint walls as an architect. And then I think it just stayed until I actually graduated.
Mm-hmm. And where did you study architecture?
So I studied in Lisbon in public school, the public school of architecture, and then I studied in Milano for a year, and then I left Portugal to study a very specific side of architecture in London for an additional 2 years.
Mm-hmm. But you were, I believe, qualified in Portugal, and then you came to UK.
Yeah, exactly. I did my master's in Portugal, and then I did a second master's in the UK.
Yeah, correct. And in the whole of these studies and in going to into the career of architecture, and do you have any an inspired architect or any firm that you are into? I probably will say Zaha Hadid, but
Not as
did
well.
you? No, okay.
No, you were not allowed to have Zaha Hadid in Portugal as your inspiration. They don't take it as a valid inspiration, probably because they don't understand the architecture and it's a bit intimidating. So you don't. It's very uncommon to bring any Zaha kind of inspiration to a class. I didn't have a specific studio. I think I had my own ideas. And especially the things that I used to read, they were like influencing me, I think. But I was just going along with my own, I don't know, my own perceptions.
Okay. And for example, even in Portugal, did you have the thoughts already to work and travel around, abroad, or do you want to, for example, to start in Portugal, see how the architecture is and how you getting on, or you always wanted to go just to another country and explore?
Actually, it was never like on my mind to go abroad and to work from abroad. I never thought that I would be living in another country. I think it just happened because I realized that I was not in the right place. I was not surrounded with people with a similar mindset than me. So I kind of felt like I had to look for something else, and that led me to another country. But if what I was studying and what I learned from the UK was something that was being taught in Portugal, I don't think I would have left. It's literally because I understood where the career was progressing.
Okay. And when all this Zaha Hadid started?
So when I went to the UK, I went to a very specific program that is called Design Research Laboratory, and it's a master and it's a post graduation. So everyone had a master at that point, and it's a very well known post grad around the world. Not very known in Portugal, especially the AA is a very known school. It's where like Peter Cook, Ram Koolhaas, Zaha, and I mean a huge number of great architects were students before in this school. So I went there to kind of see what was like this about, and what programs they had, since I had like finished a master in Lisbon and I was really not satisfied with what was coming after. So I saw this program, Design Research Laboratory, that is literally about design in architecture, but especially the technology that is around that is influencing design in architecture. So it was very technological as well. And then in this program, Patrick Schumacher had like a studio. He's the director of Zaha. And I heard about Patrick not because of Zaha, but because of what he was writing, which is called parametricism. And I was reading a lot about parametricism when I was doing my master on my own. I kind of landed in parametrics, which made total sense to me. So when I heard that, when I saw that he was actually teaching a studio, I said, okay, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to learn from this, especially how to do parametric architecture, which is not very common to be taught in Portugal. So after I finished, I think I did well. So Patrick spoke with me and he asked me if I wanted to join, or I asked him if I could join. And he, some months after, he recommended me to one of the directors of a cluster at Zaha. And then I interviewed, and Zaha became like my plan A after I finished the RL. There was like no other plan.
Oh,
And
that's
then I
great. Yeah.
landed. Yeah.
So because it touched the the topic of parametric architecture, if you could describe it, what it is, how would you do it? Because I think is at the moment something that more and more people getting into the topic, like parametric design and architecture. Perhaps maybe people that they think to study architecture now, they don't know what it is, or maybe people doing just the bachelor's now, they might be interested. So how would you describe it?
I think first, I think it's important to see where parametric is in history. I think that parametric has already reached kind of its peak, and now it's becoming a bit more mainstream, which is good. It's great for companies to actually embrace our parametric architecture. And it's becoming less of like a niche. There's a lot of things that happen after parametric. So I think we might be even heading to a post-parametric kind of era. But the important thing for offices, especially, to understand what parametric is. So for students, it's cool. It's like, it's facilitating, and it's like, it's something that eases your work. For offices, it's important to understand that what parametric is, like the name says, is basically working in architecture through parameters, like we always did. Everything that is done in architecture, like that is proportional, that is due to like measurements, they are parameters. So parametric architecture understands patterns, like algorithms, of one parameter that you use, and that it uses like it challenges the pattern and does iterations of this pattern proportionally. So it like an algorithm. So it creates like a bigger pattern, and a pattern from a pattern, and a partner for a pattern for another pattern. And this really helps on optimization of like time for architects, optimization of materials. So there's no waste, right? When you develop one pattern in architecture, and I mean one pattern, like it could be like a very obvious example could be a facade. So you develop one pattern in a facade, and a parametric tool would take that pattern and develop even iterations of change, but it's recording which change it is. So this really helps on optimization for anything. And softwares do this for you. Of course, you need to know people who know how to work with them, but it helps on everything for workflows. Then it comes a bit with like an aesthetic attached, but I think that's like a misconception. People who see like Zaha stuff, they think it's parametric because it looks parametric, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is parametric. But I think it's a workflow. It's like a useful workflow.
And was any project that you did as Zaha did that you were, it could be all of them, but that you were certifying to be part of that project or for that team? And what project was it, and why you were certifying to do it?
I had many. I think I was working mainly on competitions for some time, and then at Zaha, when you're working on a competition, the competition wins, you are invited to stay for the later stages. especially because design keeps changing. So if you were like responsible for the design on competition, they know that you are the most responsible to evolve this design for later stages and change the design for later stages.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing a bit of both. And in the end, I think my favorite ones were the competitions. One competition that we lost that was very important for me, especially because I was the lead designer of that project. It was an airport for Saudi Arabia, and unfortunately we lost for a very good company called Nikkei Sake. But it was probably one of my favorite projects that I've done. And then another one was an airport for Mumbai. I was also extremely responsible for the design inside of the project. And the airport I actually developed for very late stages, but then they found out that the client had like, I don't know how many thousand shell companies, and they took the project away. So we lost the project, and it was like a year and something on this. And
Wow.
then the last one was like by far Tower C is getting built right now, and Tower C has been a tower that I've been developing. I developed for 2 years, and it was also a competition for Shenzhen, and I think that tower has like a special place in my heart.
That's very interesting. Yeah, no, thank you. And what's not maybe not the research, but what's the mindset behind when you do the competitions or you do the design, or you could say like what's the culture in Zaha Hadid? For example, what it takes to get to the final design or to the final stage of the design and say, right, this is it. We're gonna submit this one, and we're happy with that. So yeah,
I think
what's the
I
thoughts
think
behind it?
so. The office is pretty big. It's 500 people, so that also creates like multicultures inside. There are
Hmm.
departments, we call them clusters, and then of course each cluster has their own motivation and literally their own culture, even like language wise, and they speak like different languages and all that. So it's a fairly big company, but the culture that I experienced, it was from a very specific cluster that is called Zaha cluster. It was a cluster that the last cluster Zaha created, and it was very dedicated to design in architecture.
Hmm.
So basically, what's the most important motivation for this cluster is definitely and by far challenging design, and especially creating buildings that you have never seen before but are still buildable. So that was kind of the thing that you had to keep in mind while you were creating. So my job was to create 1,000 of ideas and model 1,000 of possibilities for a brief. So when
Hmm.
I'm modeling them, and what the inspiration behind them is usually what have I not seen yet that it would make sense for the city, or it would make sense for the current culture. And that's definitely what's driving behind this cluster work. And then the workflow is usually, let's say we have like for a project, we have 4 designers. In these 4 designers, you have a lead, 2 seniors, and 1 architect or 1 assistant,
Hmm.
or a lead, 1 senior, and an assistant. And then basically everyone is responsible for designing as many ideas as they can for a brief with a specific logic and a strategy. So you cannot just be like modeling randomly.
Hmm.
It's like curated for this brief for this client. The project leader not so much, is like really just managing the project and presentations and all that. And then you
Hmm.
meet every 2 days, let's say, and we all go through like brainstorm through the ideas. And when we like, usually we pick like 2 branches of thoughts that are very much opposites, and then develop them 2 in parallel. And then it comes to a point that you actually present to the client like a midterm presentation. Then the client kind of like is leaning towards something. They're always leaning towards something.
Hmm.
At Zaha usually we try to submit more than just 1 option, which is like a smart strategy, but I don't think it goes often farther than 3 options, let's say. 2 options is the more common
Okay.
one. And then we develop them and we submit 2 options, hoping for one to
Okay.
win.
That's fair. Oh, thank you. Um, and I know as well that recently a change in your career happened, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm also excited to talk about it. Just the first question, you still at Zaha Hadid? You still doing work for them?
No. I left.
Okay. So you're now completely a director of the Metaverse third
Yeah,
era.
yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting and exciting.
Thank you.
So what's your thoughts when you decide I'm gonna take this as your future career, or like the next journey? So yeah, so how did you decide it? I bet it wasn't
So
easy.
no, uh,
Okay.
it was not but I think I worked at Zaha for 5 years, and it's important when you are in an office to kind of make sure that you have a trail that you want to pursue to grow. And I think after, because no one's gonna do this trial for you, so you should like
Hmm.
know what you want to be learning for the next year and then for the next year. So when I reached the fifth year, I was kind of I think I was already checking out a bit from the company. So actually, I told my director, like, listen, I feel like I'm checking out. I don't know what's happening, but I was already like having a different mindset. And then suddenly I was reached out by this Canadian company called Wilder World. They are 150 people spread around the world. They have been building the metaverse for the last 10 years, building
Wow.
the engineering side of metaverse, the game developing side of the metaverse, which is extremely complex. So they saw my stuff on Instagram. They saw my portfolio. I mean, my work, not my portfolio. The things that I
Hmm.
was showcasing, and they thought this is the kind of architecture that we want to bring in, because they have mostly designers from Blade Runner, from Marvel, from Dune. So it goes very much into cyberpunk, their design. And they thought, okay, let's make like a huge contrast and get an actual architect to design this other era of, like, they call it the
Hmm.
future era. So they challenged me. It was like March, and they asked me if I wanted to be the director of this department. I was like, obviously, I was kind of like, I know this is a huge risk because it's the metaverse. This is how we call it now, but it's the Web3. And I know this is a huge risk. It might just drop suddenly. It might, like, not go very far. But then, I mean, the finances that are going on metaverse is insane. It's like beyond you would
Wow.
never grasp. And when I heard it, I understood. Of course, you hear a salary and you're like, what? And then you actually also think, so what's happening in this business? What's really, if this is me, how is like the rest of the company? So that there's something like really big here. And then I thought, yeah, I think I'm at the right time and the right age for a big risk. A big risk sometimes come with like huge rewards. So I was okay. Let's just
Absolutely.
do it. Yeah. And then
No, definitely. And
yeah, I agreed in March, but I only told my company in June because I really wanted to finish Tower C. So I was
mhm.
like holding it for a couple of months, also out of respect for the time I spent in the company. And then yeah, left.
And okay. And I assume as well, because I've been following your work, I've been following your Instagram and the wider world as well. And as you were describing earlier about the processes and the thinking of making the design as I did, I believe you take that as well with you for this company, because I've seen your sketches
Yeah,
and I've seen your 3D
smart.
as well.
Yeah,
And it's not something that you will see anywhere. It's nothing that
yeah,
more likely probably will see on Dubai, because it's probably like where the futuristic buildings are.
yeah,
Um, but you wouldn't see that anywhere, and then that's one more interesting and like make us thinking. Is it is the future? Like, is it gonna be like this? Because it could be digitally, but in a couple of years we could see actually in the real world. We never know. And
exactly,
um,
exactly.
so yeah, like where is it the thinking really of when you make these drawings? It's like, okay, I'm gonna make something that no one else seen this before. I'm gonna make something crazy and enjoyable at the same time, I believe, right?
I think what's really funny. First, what you said is like 100% true. So the workflow that goes behind metaverse, for me, it's very similar to the workflow that we did at Zaha, because since I'm the director, I'm bringing the workflow with me. Like, it's very hard to kind of start a workflow from scratch. So that's
Hmm.
why there's a lot of similarities from what I was doing. And then what is really funny about the experience of designing the metaverse is you would think as an architect, especially as an architect, that you want to divorce from all of these constraints that they were like your biggest headache when you were doing architecture, right? Which is like repetition, patterns, budget, gravity. So all of this, you're like, whenever I hit metaverse, it's like I'm gonna take this completely out, and then it's totally not true, which is kind of annoying. But the reality is, you need to balance what you want to be realistic, and when I mean realistic, it's almost like hyper realistic, so the people who are going to experience it recognize what are the canons or what are the archetypes of their traditional space. They know what's a corridor, they know
Hmm.
what a door is, they know what a window is, and you still need to use this vocabulary. So there's like a balance between very real spaces and very real way to navigate, very traditional ways, and what you can kind of push to the imaginary, like floating things or floating lights, or but it's a balance. You cannot just go
Hmm.
totally dystopian on metaverse, because people would not feel comfortable in it, and maybe not even recognize how to act on it, because they're
Hmm.
not used to it. So even when I got to this company, what they are doing is extremely real, like on the cyberpunk kind of way. It's very much like a game, right? So like a
Hmm.
cyberpunk game, like a Blade Runner. So everything is hyper realistic to the point that it looks like it's 100 years old, and it's like this apocalyptic kind of. But they do doorknobs, and they do like an hyper realism thing, and I was very confused, like, but now it's the time that we can just not have like vertical stuff, like we can have horizontal floating stuff, like. And they were, no, 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 we need like a good base of realism, so people understand that they're living in just a second world, and not like a dystopian world. So I tried to find like that balance, and I'm still doing a lot of trees, a lot of greens, a lot of things that
Hmm.
brings us like peace in the real world. But yeah, I think that's like the biggest challenge for me.
That's actually very interesting. I'm looking really forward to see what's in the coming years come together, and
Thank you.
what really waits, really. And so in all of this, how does success and architecture relate to each other?
Success in architecture.
Yes. So I mean, you could interpret it two different ways, I believe. But you could do it on your own interpretation, because it could be the success of the building in terms of how it
Yeah, yeah.
performs.
I was going to ask
Um,
you that. Is it financial success?
I'll probably will say actually at this moment, like, because the climate change is quite a big topic right now. Um, yeah, so probably like what's the success on the building in terms of the way it performs and the impact it gives to the world, and society and the environmental as well.
Oh, in that side.
Hmm.
So not all buildings are requested to be or expected to be green buildings. Usually, architects, they have to bring their own responsibility of turning them into green buildings, and challenge the clients to make them green buildings, because green buildings cost more. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we need to add devices that help the building to be green. And when you add devices, you're adding budget.
Hmm.
And you need to explain the client that it's not for his own profit, but it's for like a bigger picture kind of profit. This is almost impossible, right? And when he's like trying to save money on windows and glass, and then you say, yeah, and by the way, why don't we just, it's not that
Hmm.
easy. But then there were a couple of tricks that the world has been doing that is like extremely smart, uh, and they have been like kind of encouraging the clients to be green. So they are like giving awards, and great giving titles, and like the greenest building of the world, and then they give a lot of media exposure for that. So they are giving out awards for this. So for the first time in the last years, we started having these buildings for competition, like the traditional skyscraper, and like we want an
Hmm.
iconic museum. And then in the end, we want to be the greenest building of the world, all of them. So which is great. It's like a kind of reward, and a prize that we made up, and it made the clients, because they're so vain to actually want to achieve that.
Hmm.
So then, which is really good that you start like bringing these green techniques to architecture, and then I think that's a good way to evaluate a building, but not all buildings are evaluated on their green ratio and like, or on their carbon footprint.
Okay. Um, and I've asked this before to Ollie, and I might ask you as well. It might be quite a personal or in terms of professional question. I'm not sure if you are, well, I believe you are ambitious person, and probably the type of person that likes to plan ahead or have the life plan, or
Yeah,
maybe not.
yeah.
Um, so how do you see yourself in 10 years time? Like, do you see yourself with
Oof.
a company on your own,
I think
or
10 years is a big stretch. Like, I think so.
is?
At this point, when everything that I've done in life, I know I have planned, and I know that I had like also a bigger holistic kind of picture for me. But at the same time, you need to give like a very big space for surprises. And this
Mhm,
is like something that is really important because it's not like you should be waiting for the opportunities to come to you. That doesn't happen. But sometimes opportunities come in a flash and changes things totally. Like the metaverse thing that happened to me, it was, I would never guess it, like, in a million years that I would be doing it. So I kind of had to give this little opportunity of surprise for
mhm,
something to change like 180 degrees. So that's something that is important. But still, while I'm at Wilder and directing this department, I have like a fair idea of what I want. Especially, I'm not sure if it's 10 years. It might be before that. But the point is to learn architecture from one of the biggest firms that was Zaha, and
mhm,
the traditional physical world kind of architecture, and then learning what the digital architecture is on another one of the best companies that is Wilder. And the whole point is to open an office that is able to live on both, that
mhm,
are running in parallel. Because right now, digital architecture and metaverse architecture is actually bringing a lot more revenue than like a lot more profit than the real life architecture. It's an immediate
wow,
profit. It's a direct profit, and it's like it's not running in the long run. It's not like physical world. You take like 10 years for a big building, and the digital one it take you like a week to give it to
mhm,
like a good client. So I am a strong believer that the smart architecture offices of the future are going to do them in parallel because one feeds the other one.
mhm.
And I'm extremely like excited to test that out on my own.
Okay. No, it's interesting. I we're touching again about the point of metaverse, but it really makes me think. As you're saying, like this company, while the word has been working for metaverse for 10 years, but we
Yeah.
probably heard about metaverse like
No.
3 years ago or
Yeah.
something, when Facebook announced it. Um, and then all these things that we've been talking about, the change of architecture and how wide it is and quick is changing digitally. Uh, not a lot of people know in real world what actually is happening. So we'll probably see, maybe in 3 years' time or maybe less, people already like interacting with these buildings already on the VR. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, I hope so because it's fun.
I haven't experienced yet, but I'm looking forward for that.
Yeah.
Um, no, so that's very interesting. That's great. Um, do you have um, anything that will come soon that you are waiting for to announce, or is it something that you're excited that really soon is going to happen, that you can tell us, or
I,
you want
I
to?
think right now it's more like a process, right? You're putting it
Mm-hmm,
together, and it takes so long to put it together because it's not like you're waiting for engineers to put it up, but you're waiting for like developers, game developers, and IT developers to put it up. And since it's pioneering and it's starting, it takes a bit longer for companies to understand what the process is. So
mm-hmm.
I'm kind of going with the process, and learning with the process as well. So I think it will be public in like less than a year. People will be able to walk around there. I hope so.
That would be great. The one thing that came to my mind now, as you say about engineers, that's the fun part of the digital era, because you don't need to deal with planners, you don't need to deal with engineers, or what things
I mean,
can't or cannot do.
for now, I kind of have a feeling that we don't have like loads of these hierarchy and titles for now, but they will come. They will find their niche. I'm pretty sure, because you do need rules. You're doing cities, so you do need planners, but you're doing your own plan. Like in the beginning
Right.
of planning architecture, they are doing their own randomly. So I'm like doing my own. But if this company had like someone who's actually an urban planner, I would have probably to follow their rules and work very similarly to normal architecture, because we're doing a city. And then like game developers are actually your own engineers, so they are the computer says no of this industry. They're like, oh no, and then they're like, no, but it can be floating. They're like, that's very complicated. But then because then you need to bring the avatars up and you need to do this transportation. It's not that easy, like coding wise. So they're putting the constraints on, which makes sense. And then you have like other constraints that, so the physical world is still powering the digital ones. That means you need like servers, computer,
Correct.
internet,
Yeah.
graphic cards. You're still powering the digital world. So that's how far the digital can go. So that's the kind of constraints that you have. Is like how much weight does your model have? How many polygons does the model have? What can we make that is repeatable? What can we make that is an instant? It's like the real world. So I think for every constraint, we will have a specialist in the future. I'm just happy they're not around now.
No, exactly. No, that's very interesting. Thank
Yeah,
you. And yeah, well, we are now 30 minutes off the podcast. It's been really great and really rich topics we touched about. And if you're happy, maybe in 1 year or 2 years time, we might do another podcast just to give an update of how the
of
metaverse,
course.
and probably we can do some
Let's
like
do it.
some comparisons, like what we thought on this podcast that would be in 2 years
Yeah,
time, and then
I agree. That's so much fun. Yeah,
no, definitely.
100%.
No, that's great. Mariana, I can't thank you enough for being with us on this episode. Thank you so much. And I will give on the podcast video version the links below on your Instagram, the Weller World, so people can be updated the work you've been doing and what might happen in the future as well. And no, yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Pedro.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for inviting me.